Let me tell you of my development hell for the last 2 weeks. So I had this bright and wonderful idea to make an anti-ship missile, because I have not made one yet. It's been 2 weeks, and I still have not made one yet. The first step in any project is figuring out the goals, requirements, and constraints. For me, I just wanted to make a cost-effective anti-ship missile that can hit and disable large warships consistently. That was it. To know what else the missile needs, here's a quick list. It needs to hit the target, which to have a higher chance of hitting the target, I can either have a missile that has a higher speed, therefore not giving the target time to evade, or give the missile tracking so that even if the target evades, I can correct it and still be on track to hit it. It needs to deal damage, simple enough, and needs to actually work and look recognizably like a missile. So, an anti-ship missile needs to actually look like a missile and not like a horrid abomination. The second step is always research. What have other people done? Does it work for them? Will it work for me? And my use cases. For example, torpedoes pretty much do the same exact things that I want, but better in every single way. Reasonably, torpedoes fill the same exact niche in Trailmakers that missiles do on the water. There's no real reason to build an anti-ship missile when you could just build an anti-ship torpedo. However, the problem is torpedoes stay inside the water, and torpedoes that stay along the surface and hydroplane, they can get really fast, but they still aren't missiles. They don't look like missiles, they don't act like missiles, therefore they don't work for what I want it to do. Because aesthetics are part of my requirements. So, can I copy from real life? Real life favors smaller missile swarms due to the sensors on enemy warships being able to detect them from a lot farther, and smaller targets means harder to detect. Also, having multiple smaller targets means that because each of them individually is smaller, it's harder to intercept them. And also, having multiple targets and being unable to blow all the missiles up with just a few counter missiles increases the effectiveness of saturation tactics, which is to say, you can only shoot so many things down at once, so what if you just throw more things than that amount at the target? They fundamentally will not be able to hit all of them. All of this is just different ways to aid penetration and the chance of hitting the warship, therefore increasing cost effectiveness. Trailmakers ships can't shoot down missiles at all. They have no point defense, which is the name of stuff that shoots down missiles. Because they have no long range sensors, so there's no reason for that. No long range accurate weapons to, hit stuff far away. Takes even less to saturate the few weapons that do work like that. And missiles have more HP in game. So overall, pretty strong decisive victory on the missile side rather than the defending warship side. Basically, the intercept window is too small, and the chances of intercepting in that window are also small. Surface skimming is an interesting topic because in real life it's used to decrease the amount of time the enemy warship has before actually intercepting the missile, because you can't see past the horizon with the radar. In game, the surface skimming is going to be a necessary part of it due to the fact that otherwise it's going to fly over the warship, and we want it to actually impact the warship, so it's going to have to stay very low to the water. Okay, so that was all the theory. Now time to start into the actual building of it and how all that happened. The first save I have, I wanted to give VLS cells. Basically, what those are is having the missile launch up vertically instead of popping out horizontally. Why? Because it looks very cool. But whenever something detaches, all the mechanical blocks reset in positions. So I could not store like information in the compass rotation to actually know which direction which direction the missile should go after it pops out. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure accumulators could store information after being detached, but I could have definitely done that. Well, regrets for another time. Second save, same thing. Tried to bolt the information on separately and store it in a relative orientation to the missiles, in the way that I have the compasses connected. But it kept connecting to the ship instead, and I did not have the time or energy to deal with the launch system because, I still wanted a missile, which would cause a lot more issues, and that was what I wanted to focus on. Third save. As mentioned, there are two ways to have a better chance at hitting stuff: doing it faster and doing it smarter. One way allows you to correct yourself if you were wrong, the other way just gives you less time to be wrong. Then I realized it's not really a missile if it can't turn itself to track targets. So this was fine as a proof of concept, but I would switch to a full-on tracking missile later, or at least try to. Save 4, guidance and gimbals. It can now go towards targets, float pretty easily. This is where I really started to notice a lot of the big issues. Save 5 is really the same thing. Quick comment on why I chose the sensor setup that I did. It's cheap and it scans wide. That's all I cared for in a simple missile like this. Frankly, investing more into a system like this, when it's only going to have a few frames to react anyway, there's no point. And search patterns, no point. It's because it's tracking on a two-dimensional surface, so this was really all I needed. Save 6, I noticed that it often fell too fast after a big wave and sunk, so a speed sensor was added to limit the fall speed. That was pretty much all that happened, so that now it can actually launch out correctly. Pretty much all the saves past this were just insane suffering trying to get something to work when it obviously won't. I realized that it needs to stick to the given altitude better. It not only needs to go up, but down as well, so I tried to start using aerodynamic blocks for altitude controls, because, they are a lot faster and can go up and down. This is also when I started to give up. Saves 9 to 12. See, the problem is not only do the blocks break when they detach, when the blocks break if they have been receiving inputs before they detach, but some blocks just don't seem to work at all. Why? Who knows? Save 13. So I was restricted to control surfaces, but not the dedicated air-controlled blocks. You can only mount so many restrictions before the question does not have an answer. I swapped to hinges to control lift fins. I started losing it by this point. I was just doing whatever to get it to fly at an altitude, and it just was not working. Skipping save 15, that was a test build. Skipping save 14, that was a test build. Save 15 was visibly getting closer. Sometimes it would fail and just hydroplane, but you could sometimes maintain altitude, but most times it wobbled. I actually recognized this issue pretty immediately. Whenever you see actions like this, where it wobbles up and down and where it constantly overcorrects or undercorrects, even though in theory it should be fast enough to account for it, the problem is always the response times. If you just have it respond early enough, it'll be able to do it correctly. Sometimes you need to make it respond like way in advance, but this case I could just solve by making it react faster. And as you can see here, here's the proof that hinges are actually quite slow, at least compared to servos. There's a reason every high precision and speed creation uses servos in Trailmakers. So I try one last time to make my super missiles that fit increasingly harder constraints. Fourth to last save. It actually holds altitude with minimal wobble and flies stably and does not sink on even the big waves, which, slowly getting there. This thing might actually be a practical missile, is what I thought before, hitting other issues. But third to last save, trying to get it to skim the surface without actually skimming the surface and just hydroplaning is actually quite hard. The problem is I also needed to restrict the altitude. Because if it can still fly over, so I needed to fly very low to the water, which it was having issues doing. A few hours of tuning later, second to last save. This one actually can do almost everything I need. But as we all know, 80% done just means the last 20% will take 80% more time. All I need to do is to get it to not go as high, and then the altitude sensor would always be, sorry, but then the altitude sensor would be always on during the launch and thus breaking it. So I couldn't really solve that issue, at least not immediately. By the way, fun fact, the altitude sensors detect altitude only from the side that has the arrow, just like the distance sensor. So, it's offset a little. Anyway, last save, which is the last one that I have saved, obviously. The easiest solution was to just shoot it low. It's so close to working, but I just have to stop this project. Sunk cost fallacy will not get me. Because you see, the last insert timestamp of video has all been about getting just the surface skimming to work. I still have to actually get it be able to pull high G turns without stalling and sinking. What does not even and that does not even mention other optimizations I would have had to do. I could have easily spent more than a month on this. Frankly, it's just an insane project. A very interesting insane project, but an insane project nonetheless. So, what could you actually take away from this? Clearly define what you want from a creation before you start building the abomination. Then figure out what blocks or combinations might fulfill those requirements again before building. And lastly, even something that seems basic and is often a lot harder than it looks. So, everyone talks about missiles. Missiles seem like a pretty basic concept after all. It's just a stick, thruster, and some fins. In practice, to get it to do the complex maneuvering that you want it to do just right in a high-speed, dangerous environment, oh boy, is that like 26 times harder. Oh, and also try to steal as many good ideas from real-life equivalents rather than trying to think of a new way to reinvent the wheel. Anyway, that's it for this insanity. Next video is going to be about realistic spaceships and why they're cool.